Hi guys, let's continue with the U.S. and China relationship. That's my one of my New Year's wishes. And I just want to say that the first thing, a couple of things. The first thing is that I wish the American politicians won't sit there thinking that China is trying to do anything possible to destroy U.S. I don't think that will be the case. Okay, first of all, there's a internal issue, internal trouble. China is right now, including Xi Jinping, it's not in a totally a secure position. Okay, let me that's probably the best way to put it. He is unlike Chairman Mao when Mao is alive. Chairman Mao was no undisputable authority because the whole country is basically he founded the republic, right? And then he defeated Chiang Kai-shek, and then he sent army to Korea War, and then even though they basically we have like a we have an even result because the both sides ended up in a 38 parallel line. So there's no landslide victory on either side, but that doesn't affect that the Chinese Beijing from claiming that we defeated the U.S., we defeated the UN armies. Well, to a certain extent, they do get the credit because the number of weapons, the logistics is just no comparison on the Chinese side than on the American side. Okay, although we have to admit that lately. Um, at the later stage of the war, the China got a lot of military aid from some former Soviet Union, but even former Soviet Union doesn't is not a match when it comes to military logistics. Okay, so in that to that extent, we should give them some credit for kind of a break even, having a negotiation of a ceasefire. So that's one thing, okay. But I'm just saying that Chairman Mao was undisputable authority, but Xi Jinping is not the case, okay. In fact, you have to understand the Chinese culture is such a way that they would love people with the academic uh, competence to be the leader. Well, Chairman Mao is different because Chairman Mao is a pretty dumb when it comes to math or something. He is a very uh, uh, one-sided talent. He can do the military. He can write a poem. He can write books and anything that in words, but not in numbers. Okay, so when it comes to economy, he doesn't know. He basically knows nothing. He's kind of like an idiot. Okay, but unlike Chairman Mao, Xi Jinping ended up going to Tsinghua University, which is the number one university in China, as a recommended, not going through the college entrance exam. So that put a great discount on his credibility because China is such a country that they admire people with academic competence. They somehow, you know, thinking that anybody smart in math, smart in physics, smart in chemistry, smart in STEMs are trustworthy. Xi Jinping doesn't have that credibility. So when we talk about the personality cult, I'm sure that a lot of the people inside China it doesn't really look up Xi Jinping. So Xi Jinping's position is not as secure. It's not nearly as secure as the Chairman Mao. That's why he's so sensitive that when there's a white paper movement in Shanghai, when people holding up a piece of white paper, and then he basically quickly switch courses because he doesn't want to people think that he's the one like make this country, make the republic collapse. So he is really uh, sensitive to that. So that's one thing that we have to keep that in mind. Second thing that I'm continuing that is that why the American politicians should not think that China is doing anything possible to, crash at the U.S. Why? Because China has its own domestic issues. You know, as a political campaign, Xi Jinping will always, of course, he will say that, we'll talk about the Dongsheng Xijiang means that the eastern is up, that the western is going down. But that's partly propaganda, but partly he have to say that to convince the Chinese. Okay, that doesn't mean that the China has not has its own domestic troubles. A lot of domestic trouble, especially when the military is not, when the economy is not doing that well. Because the legitimacy of the Communist Party of Beijing is mainly depends on the bring a better life to the Chinese people. Okay, so if the economy is slowing, a lot of people don't have a job, and their job security is going nowhere, then that's a dampened the credibility. So China has really a lot of things to worry. So instead of beating U.S., it's just something that they can say that, but if they have to worry about, it's like a rolling. When the two teams row the boat, each boat must worry about not letting the boat tip over. Okay, so for China, that's a real issue. Okay, because China has a domestically stability, maintaining domestic stability is always number one issue. It's because that the a lot of many factors combined together. So that's one thing. Uh, so if you think about that, always look at China as if like that the country is trying to destroy us. That will be way blow that the risk out of a proportion, way out of a proportion. Okay, so this is we always need, but the real problem is the echo chamber. Okay, Biden thought that he did achieve a great deal of achievement by having allies. But that's not, you have to think about this. A lot of, allies, they have been, it's not because it's always there, okay? You have to think about it that the US has been, the per capita GDP has been almost doubled. Back in the 1990s, I believe that the gap, the per capita GDP gap between the U.S. and the European major EU countries is like 16%. Now it's more than 30%. So it's so easy for the U.S. to have allies, and having allies even listen to, following whatever U.S. is doing. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it's not your personal achievement, because the country's strengths, it's there, so everybody see it. And then I can tell that the European people, they really admire the U.S. Just like the people, somebody, average guy in the Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, admiring the economy in California, or economy in DC, because DC has a lot of richest people living in this country. So it's a low income. There's a real impact on that. It's people just admire you, which is understandable. Okay, but the problem is that don't take that personally. Don't think that you would want make the airlines. The airline will be always there as long as you call them, and they will always respond it. Okay, just like you got to admire, you got the soft power with allies. So, and then the other thing that I want to say is that there was my theory is that the U.S. and China, it's almost like a building and IV. So China is like IV. They always attached to the building wall. Uh, the reason I'm saying that is that the China is copy a lot of things from the U.S. and then they instead of like a former Soviet Union, they try to separate itself from the U.S. No, Chinese learned this lesson. We should try to get closer to the U.S. as much as possible, as close as possible. Why? Because just like in a battlefield, when the us and them separate a greater distance, the air force is so easy to come down to strike you, kill the enemies. But when the two sides are too close together, the air force can't really do anything because how can you tell that the one is one from the other? So the Chinese are doing the same thing. They are acting like IV attached on the U.S. war. Okay, so instead, especially when it comes to intellectual comes innovations. That's what the Chinese are good. They're doing. They practice and they read and memorize the books and then trying to figure out how to get the highest score. That's all they do. Okay, sometimes they have some innovation, but it's only after in reference to what they learned from the U.S. Okay, so the U.S. is the real thing. It's a big building. The Ivy Chinese acting like the IV. Um, it's not a totally. I disagree with Rubio saying that China is great because mainly through the uh, cheating and stealing. That's not always the case because you have to give some credit to the Chinese that when in academics, when you copy somebody but you give a criticism, you add something to it, then that's not a stealing. Okay, that means that's actually critical thinking. China is kind of doing the same. They do learn from the U.S., but there are so many countries. Why not? Why only China is the only one ended up, in some field beating up the U.S. Because the Chinese people they try hard. They they had a discipline. They have a discipline to make the country stronger. They are single-mindedly in achieving material success. That's what it says. Right? So I don't think it's right to say that China becomes stronger by cheating and stealing. Okay, let's end it here.